At first, it was only the small things, the kind of details most would miss, but not William. He knew Kate's rhythms, her patterns, the quiet way she filled a room. And now, those rhythms had faltered. The teacup left unfinished, the phone unanswered, a chair pulled slightly away from the table, as though someone had risen quickly and never returned. None of these things spoke loudly, but together they whispered of something fragile, something breaking. William's heart pounded as he scanned the room, each detail striking him with the weight of absence. He called her name again, his voice rougher this time, but the reply was only silence. Silence that grew heavier with each second. And then, almost like a shadow moving in the dimness, he saw her. Kate was there, but not as the world knew her. She sat by the window, her figure outlined against a faint glow that seeped through the curtains. Shoulders drawn in, hands resting limply on her lap, she looked smaller somehow, as if carrying a weight that pulled her inward. Her eyes, when she lifted them, were brimming, not with words, but with a kind of quiet sorrow that spoke more powerfully than any cry. Tears traced her cheeks in silence. No sobs, no sound, only the stillness of grief. For a man who had faced roaring crowds, battlefield storms, and the relentless weight of duty, this was the one thing that undid him. Not anger, not pain, but Kate's silent cry. He crossed the room slowly, every step measured, as though approaching something sacred, something that might shatter if touched too quickly. He wanted to speak, to offer comfort, to say it will be all right, but the words died before they left his lips, because in that moment, he understood this was not a pain that words could fix. The world outside saw them as symbols, the steady prince, the graceful princess. But inside this room, they were only a husband and a wife. And here, away from the flash of cameras and the gaze of millions, Kate was allowed to be fragile, allowed to break. William reached her at last. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Instead, he knelt beside her chair, took her hand in his, and simply held it. Her fingers were cold, trembling faintly, but in the quiet exchange between them, something passed, not an end to the pain, but the assurance that she was not alone in it. Kate's silent cry was not just hers. It was his now, too. And though the world beyond the walls remained unaware, within that small room, the story had already begun to shift. Because sometimes it is not the loudest cries that change history, but the ones too soft for the world to hear, until someone chooses to listen. The room was quiet when Prince William placed his hand on the door. For a heartbeat, it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. On the other side lay not just silence, but a truth that would ripple far beyond the walls of a private home. And when he finally turned the handle, what he found broke more than one heart. Kate's silent cry, fragile yet profound, became something greater, a grief shared not just by a husband, but by a nation. If stories like this move you, if you believe that moments of love, loss, and resilience deserve to be remembered, then stay with us. Tap like to show your support, subscribe for more heartfelt royal stories, and share this video so others can feel the weight of this moment with you. Because sometimes history is written in whispers, not words. The corridor was quiet, too quiet. For a man who had spent his life in palaces filled with footsteps, murmurs, and the constant hum of duty, Prince William felt something different that morning. Stillness. It clung to the air like a fog, heavy, expectant. As he approached the door, his footsteps slowed. It was just a door, oak, polished, ordinary in every sense. Yet in that moment it seemed to carry a weight he could not explain. His hand lingered on the brass handle, cold against the skin. For one breath, he hesitated. For one breath. The heir to the throne was just a husband, bracing himself for what lay on the other side. He turned it. The creak of the hinges broke the silence, and with it, the illusion of normality. What greeted him was not the familiar warmth of home, but a room that felt frozen, as if time itself had decided to stop. The curtains were drawn, shutting out the light. On the table sat a teacup, still half full, the steam long gone. Beside it lay a book, pages open but unread, a story abandoned mid-sentence. These were small things, yet they spoke volumes. The room felt lived in, but empty, occupied, but absent. "Kate!" His voice was soft, almost careful, as though speaking too loudly might shatter something fragile. But there was no reply, only the sound of his own heartbeat filling the silence. It wasn't the kind of silence that offered peace. It was the kind that unsettled, the kind that carried an unspoken warning. For William, it was a silence of absence. And in that absence, fear crept in. Every detail in the room seemed suddenly significant. A shawl folded over the chair, a phone left on the edge of the table, screen dark, unanswered messages waiting, a glass of water, untouched. Each detail was ordinary, and yet together they painted a picture of something wrong. He stood there, still, caught between disbelief and dread. He had seen crises before, on battlefields, in hospitals, in the glare of media storms. But nothing had prepared him for the quiet ache of this moment. This was not a crisis unfolding on television screens or briefing papers. This was home. This was Kate. For the man who would one day be king, the room was a reminder of the truth most often hidden behind palace walls, that even in the grandest houses, heartbreak finds its way in. In that instant, William knew that opening the door had been more than a gesture. It was a threshold. On one side was a life he thought he was living. On the other, the beginning of a story that would draw in not just his family, but the eyes, hearts, and prayers of a nation. The door had been opened, and nothing would ever be the same. At first, it was a whisper, a few hushed questions within palace corridors, quiet concern among those closest to the family. Kate had missed an appearance, unusual, but not unthinkable. Yet in the world of royalty, absence rarely goes unnoticed. Then came the second misevent. And the third, a garden party where a presence was expected, a school visit the children had looked forward to. Each time, an announcement followed, brief, polished, careful. The princess will not attend. But careful words could not contain the unease. The absence was beginning to speak louder than the statements. Soon, the whispers escaped the walls of Kensington and Windsor. Headlines began to stir. Where's Kate? Photographs from weeks before were recycled across front pages, smiling images of a princess who had suddenly vanished from public view. For the British people, it was more than curiosity. Kate was not just a figure in a tiara. She was someone they had grown with, someone whose joys and struggles they had followed for years. She had walked with them through weddings, births, and countless public moments that felt personal. Now, her silence felt personal too. Crowds gathered outside palaces, not in celebration, but in quiet vigil. Reporters broadcast live from iron gates, their voices weaving speculation into story. Social media filled with prayers, questions, and fears. Across the nation, the absence of one woman had become the presence of a shared anxiety. And yet, behind all the noise, the truth remained hidden. Only William knew the depth of Kate's pain, the silent tears she had shed. The public saw only the blank space where she once stood, a void that grew larger with each passing day. For William, duty demanded composure. He carried on, attending engagements, delivering speeches, shaking hands, all while carrying the weight of a secret that pressed heavily against his heart. Behind every smile was a man torn between two worlds, the world that needed its prince, and the world that needed its husband. The silence was no longer just inside their home. It had spread, like a ripple, across a nation. And in that silence, hope and fear lived side by side. Would she return? Would her smile once again light the balcony at Trooping the Color? Or had the public already witnessed the last of those radiant moments? The answers did not come. Only more waiting. Only more stillness. In villages, towns, and cities across Britain, people spoke her name in living rooms, at kitchen tables, in pubs late at night. They spoke not as subject of a princess, but as people worried for someone they felt they knew. The nation was holding its breath, and it would not exhale until Kate's silence were broken. Behind palace walls, love often looks different than it does in fairy tales. It is not only romance and devotion, it is endurance. It is choosing one another, even when the world insists on watching. For William and Kate, this was never truer than in those long, uncertain days. As the nation's questions grew louder, so did the strain on their private life. Every headline, every whispered rumor, pressed against the fragile walls of their marriage. William knew the duty of silence, the royal instinct to protect, to reveal nothing until the moment was right. But silence, though necessary, came at a cost. For Kate, it meant her pain was unseen, even doubted. For William, it meant he bore the weight of two hearts, carrying what she could not say aloud. Yet, within the storm, there were moments of quiet tenderness. Late nights, when the children slept and the cameras were far away, William would sit beside Kate in the dim glow of a lamp, simply holding her hand. Words were scarce, and perhaps unnecessary. Love, in those hours, was not about grand declarations, but about presence. It was about being steady when the other could not stand. Still, love under siege is not without scars. William carried the burden of public life like armor, smiling for crowds while hiding the ache beneath. Kate, meanwhile, carried her silent struggle, aware that her every absence became a story, that her every tear might one day be told to the world. Theirs was a love both shielded and exposed. Shielded within their private walls, exposed in the relentless gaze of millions. Few could understand what it meant to be both comfort and symbol, both husband and future king. And yet, even in its fragility, their bond revealed its strength. For love under siege does not always crumble. Sometimes it endures because it must. Sometimes it grows deeper, shaped by trials that strip away all but what is essential. For William and Kate, what remained was not the glamour or the pomp, but the quiet truth that they needed one another, fiercely, desperately, humanly. Still, the question lingered, how much could love withstand, when duty never sleeps? Could their marriage bear the weight of both a nation's hope and the silent ache of Kate's suffering? The storm outside was growing louder. The eyes of the world were fixed upon them. And though love had carried them through many trials before, this was different. This was not a test of public image, nor political skill. This was a test of survival. And as William looked at Kate, fragile, silent, yet still holding on, he knew one truth above all. If love could endure this, it could endure anything. The darkest nights do not last forever. Even in the heaviest silence, there comes a moment when a voice begins to rise. For Kate, that moment was not sudden, but slow, a fragile turning of the tide. It began with the smallest signs. A morning when she opened the curtains herself, letting the light in. A day when the teacup on the table was emptied, not abandoned. A soft smile offered to William, weary but real. These were not grand gestures, but they were victories, quiet proof that she was still fighting, still reaching for life beyond her pain. William, ever by her side, noticed every shift. He had walked through the silence with her, carried its weight on his shoulders. Now, he witnessed the emergence of something new, resilience. Not the polished resilience the public admired from afar, but the raw, imperfect kind, the kind born in tears and lifted by love. And when at last she stepped into the light again, the nation held its breath once more. Cameras captured her return. Crowds cheered, voices rose in relief. But what they saw was only the surface. The true strength was not in her appearance, not in the wave of her hand or the brightness of her smile. The true strength was in the journey, in the night survived, in the silent cry that had given way to courage. Kate's story had never been only her own. It belonged, in some way, to the millions who had prayed for her, who had feared for her, who had seen in her fragility a reflection of their own. And now, her resilience became theirs too, a reminder that even the most admired lives are not free of struggle, and that even in silence, healing is possible. For William, the lesson was etched deeper still. He had opened the door expecting only darkness. What he found instead was a kind of light that only comes after breaking, the light of a love that survives, a love that strengthens. Their journey was far from over. But one truth had been proven beyond doubt. Silence does not have the final word. Strength does. And in that strength, both a family and a nation found hope. Some stories leave us with questions. Others leave us with lessons. This one, of love, silence, and strength, remind us that even behind the most guarded doors, the human heart beats the same. If Kate's resilience moved you, if William's quiet devotion touched you, then carry this story with you. Let it remind you that silence is not weakness, and that strength often begins in the smallest of steps. Thank you for watching and feeling this moment with us. If you believe stories like this matter, like this video, subscribe for more heartfelt royal journeys, and share it so others can find hope in it too. Because sometimes the softest voices echo the loudest,